Hello and welcome everyone to the March 2022 installment of Why Can't We Be Friends? This evening we are having a question and answer conversation with people who experience marginalization due to physical disabilities. And we are here with our panelists. This is Why Can't We Be Friends? We are under the umbrella of GTX Connect in Georgetown, Texas, and we are in partnership with Dell Medical Community Driven Initiatives. If you are joining us for the first time, I'm going to let you know that we will post a link in the chat. And it looks like Chuck has just posted that. You guys can click on that link. It will take you to our Slido application. And that is how we go ahead and you guys can see questions that have been asked. You guys can vote on the questions that you are most interested in, and that will push those questions to the top of the list. Or you can go ahead and ask your own question. The question can be a general question, or it can be a question that you want to ask a specific person. If you have any issues with Slido or can't figure it out, you can put that in the chat and Chuck will try to help you guys out. And with that, we will go ahead and have our panelists introduce themselves this evening.
Good evening. Kelly asked me to go first, so I will. I'm Rita Linda Lee. Thank you all for attending. The question that we were asked was, what is our relationship to the topic? I actually have multiple points of contact. My profession for many years before I retired was that I treated people, I provided mental health care for people with chronic and acute illnesses. And I have also, and I still do this actually, work in hospices. So I do care both for the families, for the patients themselves, and then for the staff. I was a family caregiver to much of my family. And then in 2009, I became my own patient when I was diagnosed with MS. And so I do have a little bit of experience with this topic, and I'm really delighted that we have the opportunity to speak on it tonight. And I look forward to your questions. Sarah?
Hi, my name is Sarah Smith. I'm asked to join today because I am disabled. I was born with a rare set of birth defects called Bacterial Association. That's VACTERL, and I had a whole YouTube channel where I went through all of it. I don't really use it anymore, but it's in there. If you look for Sarah and that acronym, you'll be able to find that on YouTube. But that association is not well known. I've had to explain it to countless doctors. I have birth defects that are both very visible and also not visible at all. And so it's an interesting combination. And I get lots of comments like, you're too young to be in this much pain. It's like, okay, well, I'll tell that to my pain pills, right? And so this has been in all my life thing. And this is fairly relevant. I was just talking about disability stuff yesterday with someone close to me, and I put it to him that the problem with disability today is that an able-bodied person is taught by an able-bodied society what disability looks like. So from the ground up, it's skewed, and that's why I'm here. I guess.
Hello, I'm Josie Talbot. I have lifelong disabilities. I was a premature baby, born at 7 months. I only weighed 3 pounds. I had congenital toxoplasmosis, which is a disease I got from my mother in utero. It damaged my left eye so badly that I'm pretty much legally blind in my left eye. I can see a little light and a little movement from it, but that's all. It also affected my hearing. I have a profound level hearing loss, and I was mainstreamed in school. So it made it difficult a lot of the time to hear the teacher or see the teacher, or even see what the teacher was writing on the board, because unfortunately I was a tall child and they always wanted to put me in the back of the classroom. But it didn't keep me from graduating from high school and going on to college. I've had a fairly decent life considering I wasn't supposed to live for very long. So that's me. I'm glad to be here to answer questions.
Thank you. So thank you all for being here this evening. I will be moving back and forth between this screen and the Slido screen so that I can see what questions are being asked and what has been voted on. So if you guys haven't had a chance to go into the questions section and have a look at that, and vote on the questions that you want to see asked. It is important to do that because without fail, you know, we get to the top of the hour and there's usually 2 or 3 questions that haven't been able to get asked. So if it's a question you want answered, then definitely click the like button on it so that it will pop it up to the top. So I am looking now, I can see that people are voting on some of these. And the one right now with the most votes is, what is your biggest pet peeve when dealing with people in regard to your disability? And anybody can answer this. All of you can answer this. So what is your biggest pet peeve? We're going to start it off with some, some pet peeves. So I will mute my microphone and let you guys go ahead and answer that question.
Okay.
Okay, I'll start.
Go on, Josie.
Because of my hearing loss, it's hard for me to modulate my voice. I'm either much too loud or much too soft. And it sort of irritates me when I'm trying to figure out where my voice should be and how loud I should be in a group, that people will talk over me or ignore me altogether because I'm too soft. I just can't tell I'm too soft.
Okay, I have 3. They're tied. One is when people tell me I'm an inspiration. It's like, no, I'm just living my life. I'm not out there to be an example or I'm just living my life. So that's one. The other is people who take ownership of my information. If I didn't walk with a cane, most people wouldn't know. People who know me would know. But so I tell people I have MS because I walk with a cane, and what people don't know, they make up. I have other disabling conditions that I don't talk about because they're invisible. Well, there have been times when folks think that they own that information, and so they'll be talking about that. That's really troublesome to me because, again, I am very private about it, except the things that I'm not private about. And people are individual about that. Some folks are not like that. I am. And I think the third one is, I bet you guys have had this too. After I was diagnosed, keep in mind now, my whole profession has been taking care of people with chronic and acute illnesses. So after I got sick, I got thousands of emails, I swear, with, first of all, the people who knew somebody with MS and died in 10 minutes, or the people who knew somebody with MS and they lived 196 and they were just so healthy and never drink soda. Well, I never drink soda. So all the things, all the ways that I could get cured and all the ways that I probably caused it. Biology doesn't work like that. Now, again, I am appreciative of the kindness that was behind people who wanted to take care of me, but it made my teeth hurt. So that's mine. I can get snarky.
Yeah. Speaking of mobility aids, the folks who insist that you must be fine because you don't have a mobility aid, if they see me parking in the back of the parking lot, they see me full of energy, they cannot fathom that there might be something not well with me. Those are great. It's like, well, you don't need a parking placard, so you must be fine, right? Like, tell me what a pain flare is supposed to look like to you, right? How do you judge that? And of course the oh so helpful. Have you tried coconut oil? Have you done yoga about it? Maybe you need to eat more kale.
I saw Sarah shaking her head too when Rita Linda had said, I don't like it when people say you're an inspiration, because I'm just trying to live my life. And I can see how that could be something that would be frustrating. So does anybody else have anything to say with this question? Are we ready to move forward? Looks
You're
like
so brave. We've all gotten that one.
you're
You're
so
so
brave.
brave. It's like I'm existing. That's not brave. Walking into a burning building, that's brave. I'm not doing that. So
Yeah. All right. So I'm over here again, checking it out, and we're gonna go with, do you experience much, well, that one's kind of general. I'll keep going. Do you find it difficult to navigate a world that caters toward able-bodied people? So do you find it difficult to navigate a world that caters toward able-bodied people?
you ever try to play video games with one workable thumb? Yes, gaming is very hard unless you're on an Atari joystick when your right thumb doesn't work. There are better examples, but that one is the one that's most prevalent in my life.
I think my favorite one is that I was asked to be a keynote speaker at I won't mention the state, but in a state capital, not Texas. And the state capitol building was not accessible. And at that time, sometimes I have to use a wheelchair. And that was one of those times like, okay, I'm the keynote speaker and I can't get up those steps. And so a bunch of very charming fellows picked me up and walked me up the steps, but it was very disconcerting to say the least. And I've run into the same thing that Sarah has, is that even though I have a cane, I've had people say to me, and when you pull in, and I don't drive anywhere, I haven't driven in 10 years. And when my husband would drive me into something, getting lectures about being in the handicap spot, it's like, people, no. So, and I think that the lack of the things that are accommodating, I mean, the steps are obvious, but it's things like I taught in a classroom one time that was 85 degrees. Well, I'm symptomatic if I get too hot. And so there's all kinds of things that people don't think about. I can't stand in line for any length of time. I will like faceplant. And again, I don't expect the world to accommodate me, but it is challenging.
A lot of times I don't hear people. If you're behind me and you're coming up behind me trying to get my attention, I'm more than likely not going to hear you. It's not that I don't want to hear you, it's that I can't hear you. I kind of think it's like, it's not that the radio's down too low, it's that the radio's off. There's no sound. And people get irritated with that. And, I worry about cars because I don't always hear a car coming, especially those new Teslas that don't make a lot of noise. Step out on the street and I walk into things because I don't have any vision on the left side of my body. And so I'm trying to concentrate to get somewhere, navigate myself. I won't see that pole. I'll just walk into it or walk into a person. And of course, they're very aggravated with me. And I try to explain, I'm sorry, I just didn't see you. But and
I do that too, Josie.
Sometimes medical situations can be different because they want me to take my hearing aids and my glasses off, and you've lost me. One time I went to a doctor's office for surgery, and I said very clearly, I'm hearing impaired. You're going to have to get people to speak louder. So they took my glasses, they took my hearing aids, and they would come in and introduce themselves. They speak loudly and point to their name tag, which I couldn't really read because the name tags were like this big. Yeah, it can be difficult. It's not impossible.
Okay. Let's see, I'm going to ask the next question, which is, do you feel like your school or school administration was supportive of you as a differently abled person? So that is, do you feel like your school or school administration was supportive of you as a differently abled person?
Okay, I'll go first. When I was in elementary school and middle school and early high school, I was in public school altogether. It was before the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I had to hear and see everything else anybody else did. I actually got spanked one time by a teacher because I couldn't walk a straight line, because physically I can't see a straight line. I have no depth perception. So yeah, I know. I actually got some help in college. It was much easier in college. And still I had some problems in college, but it wasn't nearly as bad as it's been in public school.
I can't really speak much on this one because I was homeschooled, but the reason I was homeschooled was I was pulled out of school because I was sick most of the time due to the sheer amount of germs and some of my birth defects being respiratory. I had bronchitis and pneumonia countless times during kindergarten, and my mom figured it would save my life to remove me from that.
Yeah, I was an adult when I was diagnosed, so.
Okay. So I was just thinking, because of what Sarah just said, I have a friend who has a son that is actually cognitively divergent, and she actually homeschools all 8 of her children because of the treatment that that child, or the lack of treatment that that child received in the public school system. So it makes sense that that would hold true for a cognitive disability, a physical disability, whatever the case may be. It might be just easier for the parents, easier for the family to kind of not put their kids even through that, right? Why I could see how it, as a parent, it would feel like very helpless to be depending on something that important and that out of your control for a child that needs, that has different needs than a typical average person or kid, right? So I'm wondering if that's a pretty common rescue mission for kids and parents. I would imagine that it would be. And I just never really thought about it until Sarah just said that as well. So it's interesting, but it's also kind of sad that the failure is so significant that it's just like, we won't even do this, right? So I'm going to go back and look. Speaking of parenting, this one says, what would you say to parents of children that are disabled? Like, if you had advice as somebody who's lived this experience to a parent of a child who's kind of, just on their journey of something like this, what would you say to those parents?
Actually, most Vactoral spaces happen to be run by the mommies of and grandmommies of, and to the point where I'm part of a group for this spectrum where we don't allow parents of in, because quite frankly, we go into these spaces that should be accepting of us. We get mommies of telling us we don't know squat about the conditions that we've lived with our entire lives, and get real sick of the treatment real fast. So I would say, if you're going to ask questions to people who have a condition that your child has, actually open your ears, open your heart to what those answers may be, whether you like those answers or not. And once your child has reached the age where they can safely do so. Get them into a group of the folks who actually have the condition, because quite frankly, you don't know it unless you live with it.
And yeah, I think all of that. Also, I think, and I've actually worked with parents of people with MS, so it's an interesting situation, but with what Sarah's saying, but also that's not the only thing that your kid is. Your kid is not just the disability. Your kid is a three-dimensional being, just as you're a three-dimensional being, and helping the kid accept, because it's so hard, especially for the little ones, accept what is. This is the definition of what is, but it's not all of who you are. So what, and also the same is true for the family dynamic. A lot of times if there is a kid with a disability, sometimes the whole family gets defined by the disability and not the child. So the child is not a family member, the child is a disability that defines everything else. And I think it's absolutely critical to normalize that person as the person and normalize that as the family member and acknowledge the contributions of that kid, not just what the kid requires, but the contributions and the uniqueness of that child. And compassion goes a long way in both directions, because again, you don't, I've seen, and you've all done this. I mean, we've seen kiddos who were only allowed to be the disability. And what could they have been if they were allowed to be who they are in fullness? And so anything that supports the child in fullness and the family in fullness, I'm in favor of.
I got one more thing to add. Never, ever, ever press the narrative, you're normal. I had that pushed on me as a kid. And it was very, very hard for me to accept once I reached adulthood that I was disabled, because I had been told, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, my whole childhood.
The only thing I would say is let the kid be a kid, which is basically, as our lady has said, let the kid be a kid and have as much childhood experience as any other child as you possibly can. If you have to get a bicycle, a three-wheeler or special designed bicycle, get it. Let the kid be a kid. Let them grow up, have life experiences just like anybody else.
Okay. So let's see. The next one that has the most votes is there a lot of pain associated with your disability? Is there a lot of pain associated with your disability?
That varies where the actual spectrum is concerned, because some of the letters in the acronym don't really have pain associated with it. For me specifically, I've got a fused curve in my spine, and the muscles around it get pain flare-ups, and those have made my life with opioids quite interesting.
MS has 80 symptoms that are documented. And I was doing some patient education today, and I said, MS is like a symphony orchestra. And there are some really loud and obnoxious soloists, and they're very greedy, and they want first chair, and they want all their time. So they're going to be in your airspace all the time. There are others who are subtler, but they're there. Sometimes they're duets, sometimes they're quartets, sometimes it's the whole symphony. Sometimes that's pain. And the interesting thing is it's neuropathic pain. And Sarah, you probably know this too. Neuropathic pain wasn't something that people understood very well. And the relationship between neuropathic pain, which sort of feels like your bones are breaking and somebody is setting you on fire, also can trip spasticity, which is muscle spasm. So yeah, and I think the south side of that question is, so what do you do? And again, as many people as have a disabling condition that has pain associated with it, there are that many solutions and that many experiences. They're incomparable. I mean, so Sarah and I might have exactly the same neuron doing exactly the same thing, and we will experience it differently because of our histories, because of our tolerance, because of our mood at that moment, because of our physical conditioning. And so that pain is a complicated topic, and how you deal with it is complicated. Sometimes it's with opioids, sometimes you don't have to, sometimes it's not with medication, sometimes it's with non. But it is, I think the important thing about pain is it gets your attention, because that's what biology has done. Biology has said, here's a pain. We want you to know that this particular body part right now needs a little attention. And so again, there's a notion that, especially with chronic difficult pain, that it really is a disability in and of itself. But there's also the part where sometimes the living with chronic pain that's tolerable, and there is such a thing, you don't have to medicate everything away. And you can have a full quality life without medicating everything away, every symptom, even pain. People get afraid of pain. But when you chronically experience it, it's like we were saying about a kid. Okay, so my normal is this. You know, before I got sick, my good day now, I would have been hospitalized when I was 30. But now it's like, oh yeah, it's just, you know, pain. No, it's Wednesday. So, but I think it's important to understand that, because I think that those who love us want us to be pain-free, and sometimes want to micromanage that. It's okay. We'll tell you, you know, and by we, I mean people who are willing to talk about it. Some aren't, but some of us have learned to be okay with a level of pain, psychic pain too. So my speech.
I know my pain is not something that they would, minuscule compared to what they would deal with. But I get in situations where somebody has a strobe light in my face taking pictures, or I'm out in the sun too long, I will get a migraine from it. My eyes will hurt. But it's not that common for me.
Sounds awful though.
Yeah, but I've had 7 eye surgeries, so.
I think emotional pain is in there too. And I think, you know, the emotional pain of coping, I think, is something that we tend to ignore. We tend to think of the physical pain, we deal with it, but we don't necessarily talk about the emotional pain that comes from coping, and the emotional pain that comes from reactions. And sometimes just the sheer flat out grief of what Sarah was saying, of the non-normalcy, or of the irritation, like Josie was saying, of somebody standing behind you and getting irritated because, I'm sorry, you can't read the lines. And I think that's something that we squash in each other. And I think it's something that maybe talked about could be resolved.
It's stressful.
So the next question is, do you have a lot of medical bills associated with your disability? So this question is about medical bills.
By the time I was 5, my medical bills had bankrupted my parents. So yes. And even now I am having to kick bills I've gotten erroneously that Medicaid should have handled, since I'm on that due to being disabled. I have to kick those back and forth when I get those between the company sending it and Medicaid. So yeah, it's a big deal.
I have had that experience where it took me 10 years to get diagnosed because of that, because I didn't have access to the insurance I have now. So it took a long time. But I will tell you another statistic. I worked for an organization whose sole purpose was to help people with various disabilities get jobs. 100% of the people who worked in that organization, the sheltered workshop essentially, 100% of the people who had personally or their families been bankrupted were bankrupted to the not-for-profit hospital in that town. It's a huge deal.
Yeah, hearing aids are extremely expensive. Mine cost anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000, and they have to be replaced about every 5 to 10 years, depending on the hearing aid themselves and the loss, because I continually lose hearing. My glasses are extremely expensive. I paid as much as $500, $600 for a pair of glasses. That's one pair. So yeah, there's some expense, but probably nothing in the neighborhood these ladies have experienced.
So the next question is kind of connected to that, which is what has been your experience navigating insurance?
We don't have
There's-
time for the Silmarillion here.
Pharmaceutical companies sometimes do things right. Insurance companies never do. I have experienced problems with insurance both as a patient and as a clinician. I treated people for free for years because they couldn't get covered. I right now am not on any MS meds because I failed on 3 of the 4 classes, which means they didn't work for me, which means I ended up having relapses. And on the 4th one, I have another pre-existing condition that prevents me from using them. So the only medication that would actually help me on a daily basis, Medicare won't cover. And if Medicare won't cover it, the insurance company won't cover it. I was on it for 2 years before I moved here and I actually felt better. But when I retired, when my husband retired, because he had the insurance, Medicare said, yeah, no, it's off label. It's tough being you. There's 3 medications that I have been prescribed over the last year that are over $1,000 a month. Yes, that would be no. So you do without, and I have basically good insurance, except when a drug is $130,000 a year, who gets that? I mean, the only people who end up getting that access to that drug are insured people who are working, whose insurance companies have negotiated with the pharmaceutical company to capitate the rate at that, and there's a minimal copay, or something that's not $120,000 a year. And all of the MS meds now that do anything are between $120,000 and $200,000 a year. One of them is $300,000 a year. Who gets that? I mean, who gets that?
Sarah, did you want to address this one?
No, I would be ranting for an hour.
Okay. And
Yeah,
how
you guys know that most insurance companies do not cover hearing aids at all, period. And I'm lucky enough to have one that pays $1,000 every 3 years.
Or your glasses. They probably don't cover your glasses either.
We do have eyeglass insurance. I worked for the state for 22 years, and I do have eyeglass insurance. But still, I mean, it was $238 for the last pair of glasses I ordered, and that was half price.
Okay. So the next question is, do you feel your disability has hindered your job prospects? Do you feel your disability has hindered your job prospects?
What's a job prospect?
I
I can't work due to it, yes.
I think it's an interesting thing because I'm 70, and so I shouldn't be having this conversation, but I would still love to be working. I love my work. I love what I do. I love research. I love all of that, but I physically can't do it. And one of the things that is a parallel to that, a lot of my identity as a human, my whole adult life has been in my work. And the irony is when I worked with people with disabilities, one of the things I would very glibly discuss with them was, this will affect your sense of identity. I had no idea. The degree to which it affects your sense of identity is breathtaking. And it's not just that maybe you can't do the work that you love, maybe you can't do it as well, maybe you can't do it as often, but just your sense of invulnerability, which we all have, even for a moment in our lives, and the vulnerability that comes with that even affects what you're willing to try or can. So I think it's 2 things. I think what Sarah so eloquently mentioned, I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, can you even consider the possibility because of what you're facing? Or like the schooling stuff. There are jobs that I have chosen not to take because I didn't want to deal with the nonsense syllables that were going to come when I go in there with my little cane and I can't see and it's too hot and, all the nonsense that goes with it. Or I face plant because I tend to faint, which is fun to watch, I have to tell you. But So you're going to do that. But the other is what you're even willing to try. And then physically what you can actually do, especially if, like the three of us, you don't always see all the details. And so if we're reluctant or hang back a bit or don't seem to be responding at the level that somebody would expect us to, then it gets coded as something very different than the disability. It's coded as rudeness, or it's coded as lack of interest, when it's nothing more than my physical being can't do this right now. Does that fit with you guys?
Absolutely.
Yeah, answering a phone was difficult for me at work, and I think it held me back. I would have liked to work on a consumer protection line, but I couldn't do it. Couldn't answer a lot of people I couldn't understand, and a lot of people couldn't understand me, although I had 12 years of speech therapy growing up. I spent a lot of my English class time in speech therapy, and I've been told by speech therapists that I speak really well for somebody with my level of hearing loss, but still the phone just didn't work, and it did hold me back from the job I wanted.
And the sad part is there's probably were available accommodations that could have helped you.
So let's see. I always have to make sure I'm not muted. Okay. The next question is, are there people in popular culture or the media that have disabilities that you have ever looked up to or been interested in, including characters in books? So basically, go ahead.
I'm going to flip this slightly. When I was a kid, my favorite book was The Secret Garden. For anyone who's not familiar, that is the one where a very sickly young girl is moved from India to England to live with her strange uncle. And she finds in this great big mansion, she's got this cousin who's stuck in a wheelchair, and she goes getting him outside and fresh air, and they're able to get him to learn to walk. It turns out he was just coddled the whole time. So while I really, really, really loved that book as a kid, looking back, that was some of the most ableist baloney I have ever been subjected to in my life.
Yeah, I can't say that there's anything. No, the answer to that question is no, but I am a literature junkie. I mean, I adore poetry in every cell in my being. I write it, I read it, I love it. And I also love any form of literature. So it's not so much that I admired, a character with a disability as much as just the existence of literature and poetry is so uplifting to my life and my heart that it's my coping mechanism. Anything creative is, but especially that. So I'm grateful to anyone who's ever written anything worth reading.
Well, I don't exactly have a hero, but one person did make me quite angry. Sting swore up and down he cured his deafness by listening to classical music. If you have deafness, you can't cure it. There's no curing it. It's not possible. That irritated me to no end.
So who was it that said that you could cure deafness by listening to classical music?
Sting.
Sting, like in England, the band guy?
Uh-huh.
Okay. With his medical degree?
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to follow up Josie. The other part of that answer is not literature, but celebrities who have various and sundry disabilities. They turn them into hagiographies, which is the sainted story of the endlessly brave maggot gagging stories. And I think, unfortunately, that's where a lot of the misinformation. I mean, again, I don't want to be Selma Blair. Thanks, I'll pass. And I sure don't want to be Neil Cavuto. And so it's great that they put that out to bring awareness, but then the accolades that fall upon people just for the, task of breathing seems a bit overwrought to me.
Thank you. So Sarah just used this word in this next question. Do people try to coddle you? Do people try to coddle you?
It's happened occasionally, and I usually wind up surprising them.
A couple folks on this call know me, and that would never fly.
Okay. And then the next question is, what can people say if they want to recognize your disability and not insult you or offend you?
By recognize it, are you thinking like acknowledge the fact that they see that you have a disability?
I mean, that might be the question. And it's okay if the answer is all of it's offensive, right? Because I think that that's kind of where this person is trying to figure out, you know, is there anything that's not offensive, or is it
Yeah.
depending on the person? Like for me, I mean, of course, I have no frame of reference for this, but I kind of almost tend to lean toward the like, just please don't, like it's all offensive. Like,
No, I actually don't think like that. I think it depends on the person. I mean, if somebody wants, I mean, I don't mind being a walking educator for autoimmune diseases and MS. If it's apparent that I'm okay, and what does that mean? Either you've asked me, why do you walk with a cane? I've had people ask me that. I walk with a cane. I've had people say to me, you walk so well, why do you walk with a cane? Because if I don't, I'm going to fall flat on my face. Is that okay? If it's not a denigrating question, if it's not dismissive, if it's curiosity, especially with kids. I mean, I'm great doing that. I mean, I'll sit on the floor and talk to a kid about MS all day. You know, I've survived some other things. I mean, I'm a cancer survivor, and, you know, I'll talk about that. I think it's the reason, I guess, that the motivation, and again, well, let me back up. It's going to be different for every person, just as anything else would be. Any personal question you ask of anybody is going to be different. There's no blanket rule, but look at the cues of the person you're talking to. If they seem to be withdrawn when you draw the question, it's time to zip it. If they seem to be open, then feel free to probe. And it's our responsibility as people carrying the issue to set the limit. I mean, there are some people, they could ask me if the sun came up, and I'm going to smile sweetly and walk away. There are other people who I will engage in conversation. It just depends on what I feel the motivation is for the question. If its motivation is education and kindness, I'm there all day. If the motivation is superiority, bye-bye, have a nice life.
Yeah, I'm gonna second that. It's very individual, and it's very situation specific. I have been getting questions from children since I was a child, and that doesn't bother me at all. But I also have generalized anxiety disorder, and if somebody walks up to me in the grocery store staring, what is wrong with your arm? You know, I'm probably going to flip them off and keep walking, because I'm not doing that. I'm not going to stop and get into this because I don't know you. And it's kind of a weird thing to think about. But at the same time, I had a period of time where I need to keep my arm in a sling, not because of what's down here, but because of a shoulder issue, which has been resolved since then. But I noticed people are a lot more friendly when I had my sling on. Like, I go to the store, I need to get a thing of water into my cart. Nobody would even look my way when I didn't have the sling on. When I did have it on, people were going out of their way to help me. And it was so weird. It's very, very hard to explain. I mean, for people who know me, they know I'm open to talking about this, but not with strangers, I think.
I don't mind telling people I'm hard of hearing, or sorry, I only have vision one eye, I don't care, particularly kids. I try to tell people in situations that they're going to be talking to me. I may not hear you. If you can't get my attention, get it any way you can, because I don't care. I know I'm hearing impaired, and I don't mind telling kids, I'm sorry, I can't hear your voice, because those are the most difficult voices for me to hear, the voices of children. And, it's okay, just say it louder. I don't mind. Do what you ever have to do to get my attention. I don't mind. I just want to be included.
And there's a normalizing in that. If we're willing to talk freely, there's a normalizing in that. It's like Sarah said, it's not that we're normal, but there is a normal variation on the theme, and we're part of it. Being human means, biology always wins, always. And so we are biological beings, and sometimes the biology goes this way and sometimes it goes this way, but it never goes in a straight line and you live forever. So we're all going to face something. I have a dear friend who refers to these two types of people: disabled people and TABs. TAB stands for temporarily able-bodied. And so we normalize the situation of not everybody is in the peak of health at all moments, and that doesn't make us any less humans or any less willing, any less important to interact with in a way that is kind and gracious and humane.
So the next question on here was, have you ever experienced any sort of bullying in relation to your disability?
Yes. I don't really know how much I should say. Typical playground stuff in my case. And then they found out about this technique I had developed for my younger brother, which is quite painful.
Hopefully you didn't have to use the technique very often.
Not often, no.
Josie, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah, I was bullied by teachers sometimes. I actually was taken out of school because the teacher hit me because I couldn't see, and I kept bending over a paper to write an assignment, and she didn't want me to bend over that far, so she actually slapped me across the face. My aunt found out about it, came and got me, and took me out of school, and I went to a new school. Kids were sometimes bullying. Remember, I'm the kid who couldn't hear anything. They come up and try to whisper a secret to me, and it was like spitting in your ear. I remember walking up to somebody, and my cousin, and spitting in her ear, and she goes, "Why did you do that? Is that what you're supposed to do?" But yeah, we all get bullied to some degree. Even as an adult, I used to have a dentist that I finally stopped going to him because he and the hygienist would get above me and start talking about me.
Oh, God.
Wait a minute, that's not cool. So we have a new dentist now.
This wasn't bullying. It wasn't, but it was obnoxious. I was walking, and when I go for walks, I have a 3-wheel rollator. It's basically a walker with 3 wheels, and it's triangular, and I can zip along pretty well. And there was a sidewalk and then grass on a grassy hill, and this woman and man were coming towards me, and they didn't move over. And in fact, they moved more towards me. So I tripped and fell down the hill, and they just kept right on going. I thought, well, how fascinating. But then today, this very day, this wasn't me. My husband and I were driving to a doctor's appointment, the story of my life. And we had noticed that an elder fellow had fallen. There were 5 cars in front of us who passed him. I mean, 5 cars saw a 90-year-old guy splayed out and bleeding and didn't stop. I'm having trouble processing this. And I think that if we represent anything, right? I mean, again, I'm not the model, I'm not the, but if people with disabilities represent anything, it's a reminder that if we're not compassionate towards each other, we are vulnerable beings one way or the other. I mean, this little guy was not necessarily sick. He was just an elder fellow who tripped. But I do think we have a bit of an obligation and I am not excluded from that. The fact that I have MS doesn't mean I don't stop and take care of a 90-year-old guy who fell. I think we become the reminder of human vulnerability, and perhaps a reminder that it really is helpful to be kind to each other because we all have some vulnerability somewhere. And if we don't, it's right around the corner.
So we have time for about 2 more questions. And the first one is, do you have any issues when traveling? Rita Linda, I see you shaking your head.
I can't travel now. I mean, it's going to be a long time. I mean, right now I can't travel because we still have this little bug going around, and I'm one of those people who cannot get it like these guys. So that's one. And the other is there's so many accommodation issues related to traveling that at this point in my life, I just don't, which is sad because I have wanderlust.
I can't afford to travel, being on disability, barely getting by.
Josie, did you want to answer this one? Oh, sorry.
I have no issues really.
Yeah. So they don't make you do, like, if you go through security, are there any issues with like your hearing aids, or they're just fine?
They're just fine.
Yeah. Good to know. And then the final question for this evening is, are there any local organizations that you like that support you or people with disabilities, like that nurture you or help other people with physical disabilities that you just want to let other people know about and draw attention to?
I
Not
can't think
local.
of any. Yeah, I can't even think of any local, but I'm a big fan of the Lucky Finn Project.
The Lucky
That-
Finn Project?
Yes.
And what exactly is that?
That is like it's not Bacterial specific, but it is about limb differences. They have a summer camp for kids with limb differences, and they work with folks of all ages to try to help with prosthetics, mobility aids as needed. Big fan of their organization.
Yeah. The National MS Society used to do more for patients than it does now. It doesn't do much now. I don't know what it does actually, frankly. But organizations that I would recommend that people with MS get involved with just because of the information, because this is information has so much power in this, because if you understand the biology of what's going on with you, it's not as fearsome. There's one called Accelerated Cure Project. Great stuff. And another one called NARCOMS, which is a National Association for Research in the something of MS, research in clinical care of MS. The reason I mention that, it's a registry. And so when people with MS, they sign up for it. And what we'll find, because MS is still considered a rare disease, which I think is comical. When I first was diagnosed 13 years ago, there's 1 million people in it was 500 people in the US and like 4 million people worldwide. Well, that number is probably 1/10 of what's real. And now that they have the registry, they're beginning to see that. The other thing that's happening is that normally for years, the notion was that people with MS were going to be diagnosed between 20 and 40. Now it's 12 to about 65. So that's opened it up too. So again, so information is power. It always is. And so with all of what we're experiencing, and really if there's with any disability or any disabling condition that people are dealing with, if you can find the credible source of information, as I said a minute ago, it pulls the fear out, but it helps with the management. I mean, these organizations have taught me, things, and I had done this work for years, but have taught me how to live with this and how other people live with this. And Sarah's mentioned a couple of organizations, and, Josie knows some too, but it really does help to have the info and then to connect with people who know what you're going through because they're living it.
There's a group for hard of hearing called Self-Help for Hard of Hearing. And I think they have a Facebook site. And often years ago, they used to have meetings. And I'm not sure if they're still doing that or not. But really, if you have hearing loss, you need to see an audiologist. They can test your hearing, they can check your ears, and they are a wealth of information. And if you have even slight hearing loss, you need to have it taken care of, because hearing loss that's left untreated can lead to dementia. It can cut you off from other things, from other people. Helen Keller said that blindness separates you from things, hearing loss separates you from people.
I think that that was an amazing way to end this evening. I want to thank all of our panelists again for spending your time with us this evening. I want to direct everyone who is in the audience to the chat and let you know that next month in April, we're going to be doing Veterans with PTSD, Life After Combat. If you want, you can go ahead and click on that link and register now. You can also copy and paste that link and share it in any of your social media outlets. And we really appreciate everyone. I know you can hear my dogs. We really appreciate everyone joining us this evening for this discussion, and we will keep people, informed and apprised of future conversations. It's been another great evening with a great group of people and wonderful conversation. So thank you very much all for being here. Have a great night, and we'll see you soon.